Hello there, YouTubers. This is Gus Estacio, and it's been a while, and somebody made a comment under one of the videos, and I wanted to just talk a little bit about it because I haven't really spoken much on this matter. But as you know, I am a former Jehovah's Witness. I think the person who gave the comment themselves, they are a former Jehovah's Witness. And they are currently a Catholic. And so I wanted to talk a little bit about my experiences with the Catholic Church, my friends and associations within the Catholic Church, and I guess some evangelicals might not like too much about what I'm going to share, but this is my experience. This is my life. I can't help the life that I've lived, and then I hope that the sound is coming in clear. I'm here with the window open. It's a nice day. I'm about to go to work in about 45 minutes, so I have a little time. I'm sitting here about to go to my next shift on my job, but this is an important subject. It's really maybe a little bit long-winded, maybe too long for 45 minutes, but I'm going to go ahead and share it. When I came out of the Jehovah's Witnesses, my first encounters with ex-Jehovah's Witnesses was in a kind of a discussion board called the Trinity Discussion Board. We were talking about the discussions on the Trinity, and some of the people that I encountered on the discussion board, which was really, really early in the issues of the internet. I mean, this is the contacts that we had was basically discussion boards, and maybe I think a few Java chats you can get on. But this was early before there was no YouTube. And one of the people that I encountered was not a Jehovah's Witness, but was very active on the Trinity discussion board, was a Catholic, and his name is John Pacheco. And John was superb on the issue of the Trinity. There was a couple of other people that I want to give note to, Robert Hommel, and he's, I think, on one of my podcasts. John has never been on my podcast, but I know John is a very, very busy man, and he has several children. He is a true blue Catholic, and Catholics generally have a bunch of kids, and they procreate like bunny rabbits. Which is what we're supposed to. We're supposed to procreate and spread our faith through our children. That's one of the ways to spread our faith. And so John was very active, and he used to go against a guy named Jason Badoon. You know what? Let me go in my wallet here because I think I got some notes here. And I need notes because, man, my memory loss is terrible these days. And I kept it couple, but John Pacheco and I might not have them on here, but anyway, oh no, here they are. I'm just gonna throw a couple of names on here. John Pacheco is a good friend of mine. He was then. I don't talk to him. I haven't spoken to him in years, but me and John were really close. And we had conversations. There was a guy named Ray Goldsmith who was on there. He was a senior citizen who was plucking away on the computer. And Jason Badoon was a professor at, I believe, Southwest Arizona University. But Jason Badoon this is what his claim to fame was. He was one of the people that the Watchtower Bible and Tract Society used to use for support of their translation of the Bible. And he used to use their Kingdom Interlinear which is a Greek text, a Greek translation of the New Testament, and he used their kit, or their Kingdom Interlinear, in his textbooks, or for textbooks in classical Greek. So we used to basically, I think for a long time, we found out eventually was that Jason Badoon was a Unitarian, and that explains his support for the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I believe he was a little bit of a Universalist also. So I'm just going to throw a couple of names. These are people that I encountered that are Catholics, really great Catholics that I got to meet through the years, and that are former Jehovah's Witnesses. And then I'm going to tell my story of how these are associated. So Carrie Dabney, he's been on my podcast, and he's a former Jehovah's Witness, and he's a devout Catholic. Jeffrey Schwem, he's a former Jehovah's. These are people you can Google, and if you are a former Jehovah's Witness and you want to meet other Catholics, Jeffrey Schwem is SCHEWMN, I think, but he's a former Jehovah's Witness who's Catholic. Tom Cabeen, I've had on the podcast on 2 occasions. Not only is he a former Jehovah's Witness, he was on, he's a higher ranking ex-Jehovah's Witness who served in Bethel. He was a overseer. He worked with, let's see, he worked with Randy Waters, who was the press room overseer in Brooklyn headquarters. So Tom Cabeen, you can look him up. And I'm actually going to put in the comment section, I'm going to post Tom Cabeen's, where I had him on my podcast, and I'll put that up there. And right next to that, I'll put his telling his testimony in the Catholic faith, which was done by a guy named Marcus Grody. Marcus Grody, he used to give basically stories of people who have become Catholics out of whatever. This time it was Jehovah's Witnesses. But I think Jeffrey Schwem is on there, and Tom Cabeen. And Tom was just a font of information also about intel on the governing body themselves and how they were. He was close to Ray Franz, and he just knew so much about as an insider with all the members of the body. John Grabowski. John Grabowski is a moral theology professor in Catholic University of America, and I got to meet John through my wife. My wife was working at Trinity College, and then she moved to Catholic University of America, and she worked there in the theology department. And I came to be very close to John Grabowski. He's probably still over there, and I have some stories to talk about John. And I met William Albrecht through John Pacheco. Now, William's a very dear friend of mine. We are still close. We are still in touch. William's always talking about, I got to have you on. William's super busy right now. He's doing a great deal of stuff, and I'll post some of the stuff that he's doing with a YouTube channel called Patristic Pillars. And he actually, I think he co-authored a book on the Virgin Mary, and I have that book. And now let me give another name, Ken Guindon. Now, Ken Guindon is where we're gonna start this little story of my encounter with Catholicism. Now, Ken Whedon wrote a book called The King's Highway, God's Highway to Peace and Happiness. He was a cradle Catholic who became a Jehovah's Witness. Then he went into the Baptist faith and then went back to Catholicism. And now I think he's with the Greek Orthodox Church or Eastern Orthodox Church. But my encounter with Catholicism, of course, I left the Jehovah's Witnesses, and I am an evangelical with a mixed bag of views. And I've always said I have a mixed bag of views, and I vacillate in some of those views because I just don't know. I don't know everything with all surety. I'm still learning things as I go. Anyway, so my wife was working in School of Theology, and she had a friend there, a really sweet lady, and the lady was talking to my wife, who left the Jehovah's Witnesses but is a born-again Christian and evangelical like I am. And she shared this book, gave it to my wife, and my wife, who's not big on reading books about theology, she will read some books, but she would normally, if there's a book that's passed on that she doesn't want to read, she'll give it to me. Now, I had, as most ex-Jehovah's Witnesses and Jehovah's Witnesses, because we came out of the Jehovah's Witnesses, and so we still have those inbred biases as ex-Jehovah's Witnesses about Catholicism. And we know the whole history about how the Watchtower Society had cartoon images about the Catholic Church and all kinds of really radical stuff, propaganda. So she passes me this book by Ken, and I read this book in 3 days. It was just, I could not peel off of this book. The thing that's interesting about this book that was given to me, I, of course, was a typical fundamentalist, evangelical with biases about Catholicism. I've been in several apologetics conferences. Mike Gendron, who's a former Catholic, was one of the speakers at one of the apologetics conferences I was at. And, of course, his whole goal is to debunk the Catholic Church as a former Catholic. And the conference we was at was in, I believe it was Washington State, Tri-Cities, Washington State. And there was several formers. There was former Adventists, and we was called the X Conference. So me being the former Jehovah's Witness, I spoke about the Jehovah's Witnesses, but I also spoke about inclusivism at the time and what was going on at the Evangelical Theological Society with Clark Pennock, who was really pushing open theism and inclusivism. So anyway, I read this book, and my whole views about Catholicism had piqued my interest strongly. And there's a part in this book where Ken, having now abandoned the Jehovah's Witnesses and the Baptist faith, is there in a cathedral or some church. And Ken is from Europe. I forgot what parts of Europe. And the monks there are bowing and praying. And Ken says, why shouldn't we pray to Jesus? And that was one of those eye-opening things that I had, because most people have perceptions about the Catholic Church, about all the bowing, and if you're bowing before a cross as some type of idolatry. But a lot of these things are basically based upon an ignorance of the Catholic faith, an ignorance that I became educated on now. I'm still not Catholic, but I'm not exactly anti-Catholic. And there are lots of, in fact, John Grabowski, from who I had Thanksgiving at his house, my wife and I think my daughter was just a baby. We went to his house, and I had probably the most spiritual Thanksgiving meal I've ever had at Professor John Grabowski's home with his children and his family. And it was just a great time. And I remember we were having this discussion with John's wife, and she was like, "And why aren't you Catholic?" And John says, which is what a lot of Catholics say about me, "Oh, he's Catholic. He's Catholic with a small c." So and I think that's a very flattering thing to say about someone who is, of course, I haven't received the rites in the Catholic Church. I have not been catechized, but someone who, in all but name, is somewhat Catholic. And in fact, I know things about Catholicism more than some Catholics who actually go to church every Sunday and really are oblivious about the faith. In fact, they're always telling me, and this is also another very flattering thing to say about me, who is not only evangelical, but a Calvinist. I am a Calvinist, even though I don't promote my Calvinism. You won't hear me preaching Calvinism, but I guess I'm somewhat of a closet Calvinist. I'm not out and out beating people over the head about the famous flower called tulip. So what's interesting is that I got people coming all in and out of here. Anyway, excuse me. So anyway, that was one of my great introductions to John, and I've had several introductions to John, having been at his home. And here's a nice little interesting story. So, as I said, John Pacheco is the Catholic I was first introduced to. And when I started doing the podcast, I was looking for John. And John went on to say to me, he said, I'm just too busy. And I understood. He says, but here's somebody that you could talk to. And he gave me William Albrecht, his contact information. Now, with William, so that's when I got to meet William. I got to meet William on a website called the Catholic Legate. And William has now really just shot up the roof. When I first met him, he was doing some things, but he hadn't really reached his pinnacle. I think William is now reaching his pinnacle as far as Catholic apologetics. Now, not to say that he didn't always have it in him. He just, I guess he, just like me, I'm not really adept with technology, but William now the more that he's gotten involved in technology, he has really just blossomed. And William's always done things. William travels the world teaching, and so things are now easier for William, and they're coming to him. That is, these things are now coming to him. So once you become kind of a go-to guy, people are really interested in trying to contact you, and then things get a lot easier. It's when I did my podcast, it was a little difficult in the beginning. It got easier along the way, and then as we went along the way, that I had more scholars and on the podcast, it started blossoming, and I had more contacts, and it was easier to get contacts and to have discussions. And then the podcast got more people involved, but I never was able to reach to the point where William is at right now, because YouTube is such a social vehicle. So so I with William, we went to visit John's class. Now William and the class over there at School of Theology, he used John Grabowski used to not be in that class where my wife is now, or what was. John is then went on to the top floor in the School of Theology, and that's not necessarily a great thing. He was all by himself in a whole floor by himself. And in that floor by himself, it was extremely hot, really hot weather. And so it was like 5 floors. And my wife, what she would do at School of Theology was basically getting money from the Department of Labor for funding for the school. And that's what she did. And so John, when me and William went to see him, William came down from, and William lives in Texas. William came down. I think he had some other event to do near DC, and so he was like, "Oh yeah, I'm gonna get to see Gus." So we went to the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception, which is there at Catholic University, and is one of the 8 wonders of the world. So it's a must-see place if you are in the Washington D.C. area. You have to go to the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception and visit there, and see the wonders of that cathedral. The other thing was, so when we went to go see John, I found out he was on the top floor. Now, this is interesting. So in the School of Theology, you have 4 floors, and then the top floor, the 5th floor, is inaccessible by elevator. The elevator, you can go up 4 floors in the elevator, but on the 5th floor, you have to walk. And it's not easy. It's kind of a spiral staircase to get to the 5th floor. And once you get into the 5th floor, there's no one on that floor. And so there, I found out that John was there. There's no air conditioning on the 5th floor. You can get like window units on the other floors, but on the 5th floor, it was a hot house. And the reason why the 5th floor is so different from all the other floors is because in the 5th floor, it has the Exorcism Room. And it's actually a series of rooms, and where if you were to have an exorcist come, they would be in those rooms. And they're padded rooms, and they are, of course, for the safety of those that are possessed and their own bodies. But I went up there, and it's a little bit creepy because that floor is exclusively for people that are possessed, and that's where, if you're going to have demons, that room would inhabit demons. So John was in that room. He had a room. It was just filled with books, and it had maybe 3 or 4 fans, just circular fans for air, and then the circular fans, of course, so that you could have some type of circulation. But all it did was blow a whole bunch of hot air, and so it wasn't exactly comfortable to go visit John there. But me and William got to see John, and it was a good time to see him. And I think after that, me and William went to the shrine and got to see some amazing things in the shrine. In fact, the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception has a room at the basement, and it's called the Crypt Room. And that room, which is for worship, what makes that room unique is that the mortar in the walls of that room, and this is the amazing thing about the Catholic Church. If you go to any Catholic church, you will always have something ancient nearby. It might be just a finger bone of a saint, or an ancient cross, or something from thousands of years ago. So they had mortar specifically placed into that crypt church or crypt room, which is a church. It's a church. It's a small church in the bigger church of the Shrine of the Immaculate Conception. And the mortar is from the Church of Antioch. It's from the 2nd century. So you could be touching the wall, and you're touching the 2nd century Church of Antioch in that wall. So it was just fascinating things to learn about the Catholic Church. Now, I'm going to have some of the stuff from Tom Cabeen on here. You're going to really learn a lot about the governing body. You're going to learn about Tom's personal testimony, and it will be in the comments section. And these are the things that I wanted to share. So me and William came on my podcast for many, I think I was there for 11 years in the podcast. And William shared just fonts of information. William was involved in debates on, I always say good cop, bad cop, because of course I still believe in salvation by faith alone. But there are things that a lot of people don't know. For example, people don't know that Catholics believe in grace alone. They believe in grace alone. The areas that I might disagree with Catholicism, I'm still not sure about. And maybe, me and William have had discussions, but maybe he'll have me on one of his podcasts, and maybe we'll have a discussion there where he has so many people at his leisure to discuss those things. But they've never been obstacles in our friendship. And if anything, I've learned a lot about the Catholic Church and what it really teaches that Protestants actually mistaken and produce straw men on, and we all do it. There are devout Catholics and there are weak Catholics. There are people that are Catholics in name only. There are devout Baptists and there are weak Baptists, and there are Baptists in name only. Wherever you go, you're going to have those three criterions. People that try to portray themselves as Christians and they're not actually Christians. And some that are just weak Christians and some that are strong Christians. And so that's why we have to be very careful about attacking fellow Christians. And I'm very careful about my fellow Catholics. And I'm not in that category where I used to believe that all Catholics were not Christians. And neither am I in that category to say that some Catholics are not Christians. Some Catholics are not. Now, I'm going to share, I have maybe 15 minutes. Here are some of the things that I've learned about Catholicism and that a lot of people make assumptions about. A lot of people think that because Catholics pray to icons of saints or Mary or Jesus, that it is idolatry, and that's a misnomer. And when we learn about, for example, in the Old Testament, the tabernacle, you had icons in the tabernacle. You had depictions of the serpentine Nephilim, not the Nephilim, of the winged angels, the cherubim and the seraphim, and they were right there on the Ark of the Covenant, and embroidered in the I guess the curtain was cherubim and seraphim, depictions of them. And so, are we going to say that that's idolatry? No, God had instituted for them to specifically have the tabernacle embroidered that way, to have those designs there for people to use, to visualize angels, visualize God. And that's what people still do to this day. They try to visualize angels, they visualize God, and here's a way that me and William had talked about that everyday people do and use, and yet they're gonna make judgments about Catholics. When someone dies, what do people do? They more often than not, you'll have a grave marker, and someone will put flowers at that grave marker. Someone will put maybe balloons at that grave marker, because they're thinking about the person who died as if they are there. They speak to the dead at that grave marker. They'll talk to their mother if their mother had died at that grave marker, or they'll talk to whoever it is. They'll be like, they'll start talking about them or to them at cemeteries. And even though people don't do that very often anymore, but it has been done by people who are born again, people who are Baptists, and yet these are the same people who would say, look at those Catholics, praying to someone who is dead and claim that they're objects of necromancy. So the Catholic explanation for those things is that, and this, of course, does happen often, and I've had David Whedon, who's Eastern Orthodox, on my podcast, who also me and William got to meet. So the explanation is that when we're speaking, for example, when I'm in a Lutheran church, when I make the sign of the cross, I'm thinking about God. The cross is not what I'm worshiping. I'm worshiping the notion that God is present. And for example, in the tabernacle, the Ark of the Covenant would have the Shekinah Glory. What is the Shekinah Glory? It was the glory of God. The glory of God was present over the tabernacle as a cloud by day and fire by night. Now, does that mean God was just restricted to that cloud or restricted to that fire? Of course not. God is omnipresent. But God was manifesting himself in a special way so that we could identify with him. And that's not an attempt to lower God. It's actually the fact that God is saying, here I am, I am present. God says he's present all the time, everywhere, but also I can be manifested in a special way in your life. And so the other means of, and the beautiful thing of Catholics is that they believe the Catholic Church is its namesake. It's universal. So God's church is everywhere. God is everywhere in his church, in his people. That means if you are a Christian, and it's an oxymoron to say Catholic Christian, but I'll say Catholic Christian. If you are a Catholic Christian, then if you want to pray for someone, the Bible says that we should pray for one another. And does that stop when we die? Well, the Bible also says that God is a God of the living, not of the dead. So does God ever die? No, not really. God never dies. Physically, our bodies die, but we are present before God when we lose this husk. And one day we will regain this in a superior form. And that's what the resurrection is all about. So for the Catholic, God is never dead. If Saint Teresa is Saint Teresa, maybe there's something that was really known about her. Let's say she was known for really caring about the sick. Then that idea of caring for the sick is something that a good Catholic would always remember about her and pray that she would pray for them, because that was one of her overwhelming characteristics, talents, and gifts that she had in the body, and she still has it in the spirit. When we think about Francis of Assisi, his love for animals, that's what he was known for, and so that's what Catholics generally pray for Assisi, to pray for them about. So it's not necromancy because they are not dead. The dead never dies. It's necromancy if you're speaking to unclean spirits. That is necromancy. It is necromancy to try to contact those that are not Christians, because we know they're not Christians. They are dead to us in the spirit, and they were dead to us in the physical life. So that's why we need to be careful about talking to palm readers, and because that they are not in tune with God and God's way of things. So those are some of the things that the beauty of the Catholic Church is. We are all one holy universal church, and we are in tune with one another. We pray for one another. We love one another still, even when we lose our bodies. We are still around as spirits. And that's one of the things that I loved about the Catholic Church. There are things, of course, that I disagree with, and I don't have the time to talk about it, but I will say this, that I am a friend of Catholics with the big C, the small c Catholic, and I love my friends. I love Jeffrey, I love Tom, I love William, I love his family, and we have a lot of things in common. In fact, there was a big thing about, I can't remember, famous Baptist who got into a whole bunch of trouble because he wanted to work with Catholics about the issue of abortion and homosexuality. And I can't remember for the life of me. It was the Southern event. It was the Southern Baptist Seminary's president, and I can't remember his name. But yeah, that's my story about Catholicism. And one last thing I think I neglected to share was the book that I received, Ken Guindon's book, from my wife's friend who was a Catholic. She gave me that book, and she died a month later. My wife had been telling her to go, she was having stomach problems, to go get a doctor to check it out. She went to the doctor, and they said she had cancer with only a month to live, and she died in a month. So one of the things that I really think about is the fact that this woman gave me that book, and that book opened my eyes to some things that I never knew just before she passed away. So I think there's a reason for that. Nothing happens by accident. I think God was speaking to me through her giving me that book, and it was beneficial to me in my life to share with you today my affinity with all Christians. And I do view Catholics as Christians, just like, and I'm sure that there are people that are not Christians that are Catholics. In fact, me and William have come across some Catholics that were not too great. And we was like, how can he call himself a Catholic? Because he wasn't behaving like one. But yeah, I hope you have a blessed day. And I think I'm going to go ahead and check out and get ready to go to work. And you have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.